Hey, class, we are back, and I am back in front of the green screen, and because we're past all the just some issues we were having, and we're back in action, and I have a really cool class today, a really special class, and I think also an important class. But first, I want to say next Tuesday as well, we are going to address some of this recent sudden increase in anti-Asian violence, both here in the United States and around the world. And so I do want to make sure that a couple of students from class or participate in that class. People who identify as Asian, East Asian, not South Asian. So make sure you reach out to us if you would like to participate, if you feel like you have something to say, because we have a guest, one or two guests coming in, but I'd like to have a couple of students. So, hey, so today's class is also, I think, a really important issue, and one that is very long-standing. And I titled this class "Jews or Judaism, but Jews through the eyes of the world." And it is really something that every semester I talk about, what I identify and have identified as the longest hate. And it really, certainly in the West, but actually in my study of world history, it's probably the longest hate anywhere in the world, is this hatred of people of Jewish ancestry, both to the Jewish culture and Jewish religion. And it was really spurred on by this number 11% that I came upon last fall. And I was reading this article, and it really jumped off the page. And basically it was 1 in 10, but it turns out 11% of Americans between the ages of 18 to 39 believe that Jews caused the Holocaust. And when I read that, that was a headline. I said, okay, hang on, there's got to be something more to that. And so I read further, and I said, wow, not only that, but half of all Americans between the ages of 18 to 39 could not name a single concentration camp or ghetto during World War II, one of the concentration camp or ghetto that was created by the Nazis in World War II. And I thought, okay, there are like tens of thousands of these, right? That means just so many thousands. And I think, how's it possible? And that something like 2 out of 3 people couldn't name Auschwitz as one of the important, a concentration camp, right, created by the Nazis. And I just thought, man, this is really unsettling for me. And so I thought, I'm going to use this. We're going to have a conversation. And then it was kind of spurred on by one of our guests here who asked this question, be kind of really curious to ask people around the world what they learned about the Holocaust and when they learned about it, and so what some of the issues were. And so anyway, that's what we're going to do today. But in order, we're going to have a conversation with 5 guests from different places in the world. But we are also, but I want to set it up. I want to talk a little bit about what I see as really a critical issue. And by the way, Nish, you want to do the top hat? Yeah, it's going to be up in about 30 seconds, folks who are in class. So just watch for it. Okay. So here, let me Nish and Jeff, show this photo that I gave you. So this is a photo of some Shuar Indians, indigenous peoples of the Amazon. And they sort of up in the kind of northwestern part of the Amazon. So I was there back in 1985. This was the first time I was in Ecuador. And I met with a community of indigenous peoples, Shuar indigenous community. And, they were asking about me. I was asking about them. They spoke not all of them spoke Spanish, but, and enough did that we were able to have an interesting conversation. And I actually have a really funny story about drinking chicha that they invited me to drink this chicha drink, which is made from the yucca root, and you basically chew the yucca root until you sort of masticate it, with your teeth, and you spit in. The community gets around, and they spit it out into this big container. And so eventually, you just do this all day long. Eventually, you have a fair amount of the drink, right? So I was a guest in the community, and so the entire community came together, and they, were going to drink chicha. So it ferments and turns alcoholic. And I was sitting at the kind of the head of this big round circle, and they brought this chicha to me, and in this bucket, and they presented it to me. It was all for me. It was about at least a gallon. And so I took my first drink, and they're all watching me. And it tasted, I can't even begin. It tasted like, I guess what you would imagine vomit would taste like. And I could not drink, everyone's watching me, saying, do you like it? Is it good? And I'm thinking, and I say, yeah. And I try to pass it, and they say, no, that's all for you. And it was one of my lower moments in life that, I'm into trying everything, but drinking vomit is kind of pushes my limits a little bit. In the end, I didn't have to drink it all. But in any case, I was with these folks, and they said, so your name is Samuel? And I said, yeah, Samuel. They said, oh, okay, so that's a Jewish name, right? Now, in the United States, people don't associate Sam or Samuel with Judaism, but in many parts of the world, they do. And so often when I'm traveling in Latin America, people will ask me if I'm Jewish, because Samuel is recognized as a Jewish name. And so they said, oh, are you Jewish? And put that photo back up really fast, because I want you to really sit with this. And I said, no, I'm not Jewish. I was raised Christian. And one of the people said, gracias a Dios, thank God. And I thought, damn, even in the furthest regions of the world, in the Amazon rainforest, and people who clearly have never met a Jew don't like Jews. And I thought, this hatred is really deep, and it stretches far, far, far into all areas of the world. And so that was something that always stuck with me. So 2%, less 0.2% of the world's population is Jewish. And when we ask people what it is, in many countries, you say, like, what percentage of the world's population is Jewish? Like in the UK, in Poland and Hungary, people on average will say 20 to 25%. So people have this sense, even though it's 0.2% of the world's population is Jewish, people have this idea that it's like, 20 to 25%. I mean, it's very, very tiny. And meaning that people have this sense that Jews are so ever present all around the world. And there is this sense of the Jewish menace, or Jews who are really trying to take over the world. It's kind of like here in the United States, people have a sense that Muslims are here trying to take over the United States, when in fact Muslims represent 1% of the US population. So I don't know how 1% of the population is going to take over the rest of the United States. And they don't own guns by and large. So it's another thing to see, like, how could a population that's so small and has been small throughout history garner so much fear and hatred and concern that they will, in some level, be taking over the world, right? So then I say, all right, so I've been thinking about this a long time, and I think about the World War II Holocaust, and I think about what the Nazis did. So, you can put that first image up. This is really, in some ways, this is a photo from Germany. I think this is 1938, if I recall. And this is, Nazi soldiers marching people in the Jewish community through the streets. And this is the very beginning of really rounding up Jews, this sort of longstanding blame that Jews are the problem of Germany. And, it was very clear from early on. I mean, Adolf Hitler and the inner circle of the Nazis had really identified Jews as the problem, and they identified what they were going to do. And it was quite well known to lots and lots of people. And we've had many conversations about this in Social 19 really interesting people. And, in the end, it was one of the thing that makes it so horrifying, I think, the Holocaust in World War II, is because it wasn't just an attempted genocide of a people, but it was a rational, carefully, very well thought out mass killing of such grave proportions of so many people, systematic and very carefully thought out. And that's the thing that really has always freaked me out, that people who committed these terrors in Nazi Germany weren't, first off, they weren't the uneducated people. These were even among the most educated people, carefully thinking through exactly how they were going to solve this Jewish problem and how they were going to come about with the final solution. And mind you, when I say carefully thought out, I mean that you can't kill, when you decide that you're going to kill so many people, you have to decide how you're going to kill them, how you're going to dispose of the bodies, how you're going to do with all their possessions and all their belongings, and one thing after another that has to be very carefully thought out and systematized. People never get caught. People, usually if you commit a murder, this is a PSA for those of you who decide someday you want to, well, I shouldn't say that, but people get caught oftentimes trying to, it's not committing the act, it's what happens after the act. Right. So this is just incredibly complex. Right. So Germans were like so systematic in how they did this. Imagine just sitting down at a table and calculating step by step by step what we're going to do. It's just not some intense crime of passion. And that's what makes the World War II Holocaust so just unnerving to so many of us who think that human beings have kind of have been able to come to a new place. So what the Germans did, and you show the next slide. So we eventually, once we started to move forward, they started rounding up Jewish people, all not only in Germany, but in Poland and in Luxembourg and France, everywhere, in all the places where the Germans had taken over, they started rounding people up, and then they were sending them off, and sometimes, to factories so they would work on behalf of the war effort, and sometimes to concentration camps that were built around farms, and they were going to, grow food and all sorts, and then eventually just rounding them up into camps where people would be held and then eventually killed. And so you go back to that slide, imagine you have these trains, and these trains that are going all over Germany and all over Western Europe, and just filling these cars, just stuffing these cars filled with people of Jewish ancestry and just sending them to their deaths. It's like it takes a certain amount of I don't even know what to call it, but it takes something that's just so, for me, the thought that the ability to do such a thing is inside of all human beings, and that means at some level it's inside of me, and that's what makes this World War II Holocaust so incredibly unnerving. But the final slide I want to show you is just just see these are human beings, right? And there were about 11 million people who in the end were killed by the Nazis, and 6 million of them were Jews. So just look at, each one, a human being just gets pulled out of their lives and just taken away, and knowing, what was going to happen. And it's just incredibly unsettling. And the people who did the killing were Christians. And that's what's also really, really important to hold on to. That this emerges out of a long-standing dislike and hatred of Jews inside of Christianity. This didn't just come out of nowhere. So the Nazis, so you could say, well, the Nazis, they weren't and the Germans and the Poles and the French who collaborated and so on and so forth, they weren't real Christians. Of course, they weren't real Christians. I mean, Christians would never do that, a true Christian. But you can't tell them that. They did what they did during the week, and then on Sundays they went to church and they worshiped the Christian God that many of you worship. And so you can say, but they weren't really Christians, but they thought of themselves as Christians. And that means, that Christians, just like Muslims, just like Buddhists, just like Jews, just like so many different people, can do these things. And so then I started to look at, well, where is this in the history of Christianity, right? And then I started to, really have this idea that, well, we all worship the same God, right? So, you think these are Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. These are the Abrahamic religions, right? And they're called like that. They're called that. You can put that slide up if you will, because God. Now these aren't my beliefs per se, right? But the idea is that God had a special covenant with Abraham, and then Abraham had children, and one son Isaac, and one son Ishmael, and one son carved out the route of the Israelites, and the other, the Arabs, Ishmael, the Arabs. And so, both Christians and especially Muslims see Abraham as one of the prophets. Abraham is a core prophet in Islam, and Abraham is essential to Christianity. So when Christians, Jesus was Jewish. Jesus was born Jewish. Jesus died thinking he was a Jew. Jesus, everybody around Jesus was Jewish. The entire origins of Christianity were established by people who were born, raised, and died Jewish. And so I think Judaism is core to the entire experience of Christianity. So how is it that this could happen under the watch of Christians? And the best that I could ever get to was that somehow, at some point with the early Christian church, people who just held on to this dislike of Jews started to translate Bibles or insert things into the Bible such that, the Romans didn't kill Jesus, right? I mean, Jesus was killed. Jesus was crucified by the Romans, but it really wasn't the Romans that did that. People started to insert in there that the Jews killed Jesus. So early on, that didn't show up as one of the key core ideas, as best as I can ascertain, of the earliest Christians. But at some point in time, it emerged as something that was really essential. And so Christians then started to build this ideology around, or their religious theology around the idea that Jews were in fact responsible for the death of Jesus. And Muslims began to take that on. So even though you have the prophet, Abraham, and all of the Jewish prophets that are essential to Christianity and Islam, still it didn't matter. It got superseded somehow, that, Jews were committed deicide, and deicide is just, killing God. So here's a thought, right? Let me show you something. Go to the next slide. If you could, in the Catholic Church, let me just core doctrinal teaching. This is until the Second Vatican Council, which is in the early 1960s. This was core doctrinal teaching in the Catholic Church. All the Jews in Palestine around year 30 of the Common Era were responsible for the execution of Jesus. Every Jew in Palestine, all Jews who are currently living, are also responsible for Jesus's death. This is core Catholic teaching. God has rejected Jews because they murdered Jesus, the perfidious Jews, and perfidious means deceitful. So you think about the Catholic Church, this is core central teaching, this deep, deep hatred of these people who killed the Savior that is essential to Christianity. So you can imagine it would give rise to a lot of hatred against these people if you're not thinking straight. So here's a couple of photos then. When I I've read quite a number of books about World War II. Go to the next slide. Of these photos, and in the top left, you have these, Catholic bishops and cardinals who are cavorting with Hitler. And then you have this next photo is a photo of this Protestant gathering in among Protestant religious leaders in Germany after the Nazis came into power. And then here's another photo of Catholic leadership with Nazis, right? Like really cavorting with the Nazis, when in fact, you know, it seems like it's kind of would be really basic Christian theology or Christian ideology, just as it would be for Islamic ideology, you know, these religions that are really rooted in love and understanding and connection and so on. It would seem it would be pretty easy that these people who are coming along demonstrating this very clear, vile hatred of this group of people, that would be rejected. But in fact, by and large, it wasn't rejected. And then what I see is this goes really up into the, goes up into the common, by the way, if you're a Protestant, I'm not even going to go into that. I want to get into it. Maybe I'll come back to it later. So show this next slide. I just saw this past weekend. This gentleman was supposed to speak at the CPAC conference, this Conservative Political Action Committee conference this past weekend, and it was called America Uncanceled, but he was canceled because he has written all of this screed against Jews. Like there's no scientific evidence for the existence of Jews or Judaism. Like this is just stupid, right? And so like this kind of stuff stays there. It is deep. It's deep within the culture. It's especially deep in the Black community, I should say, by the way. And then I just want to go through a bunch of slides here really quickly and show you that this anti-Semitism is really risen up around the world. This is a photo from Charlottesville, which was a gathering of the far right in the United States about 3 years ago, and Trump got into a lot of trouble with this because he didn't very clearly and very quickly condemn these people who gathered in Charlottesville at this Unite the Right rally. And, you know, not only are they walking around with flags with the Confederate flags, but they're walking around with swastikas. Look, y'all, like a swastika, you know what a swastika represents. It represents killing 6 million people of Jewish ancestry, right? It's like there's nothing else that represents. The original meaning of the swastika, of course, is not that, but now the Nazis have just made it clear that nobody can ever use a swastika again. That's what it matters. Here are people walking through the streets carrying swastikas. So Trump got in trouble because he said things like, well, but there were bad people on both sides. It's like, dude, bro, there might be bad people on both sides. That's fine, but you have to condemn the swastika. And he didn't clearly and openly and quickly condemn the swastika, certainly not quickly enough. And so that's one, right? And we see this again, you know, throughout the US and it's in other places. Here's like some right-wing groups in Germany. And this next photo is in Finland. And, you know, here are the swastikas again, right? These right-wing groups. And there's this resurgence of a rise of these extreme right-wing neo-Nazi groups, hate groups. And here's Italy, right? It's just like, it's all about Islam. It's all about Italy, right? It's all about nationalism. So no Islam in Italy. And there's this continued condemnation of Jewish people. And here's another one from Russia, right? This is in Moscow. And hey, Julia, can you, I don't know if you can see that, but I want you to tell us later what that means, what that writing says. All right. And then here's another photo from Greece, right? And these are all symbols. There are all these new symbols that the extreme right is using, which are like, instead of using the swastika, there are all these other ways in which people are identifying themselves as hating, as anti-Semitic. And then here's another photo from Poland, right? They even are using the Confederate flag in Poland, right, as a way to do that. And so, you know, like all around this, it doesn't go away. I had this idea that, you know, that somehow after World War II and the horrors, everything that happened, somehow we would get past this, but we can't seem to do it. And this hatred of Jewish people just hangs on. And so what I thought would be really interesting, and this was, I think, sparked by Tanya, one of our guests, so you all can turn your cameras on. We are ready. And I thought, let's bring some people in from different places in the world with different experiences and have them tell us what it is that they have experienced growing up. And just what they're like, what they learned about World War II, what they've learned about anti-Semitism, a wide range of questions. And so our guests, so we have 5 different guests, and we will wait for Sodaba to come in here in a few minutes. But Murtada, we have Murtada here from Saudi Arabia, and so you're in State College, but you grew up in Saudi. So thanks for coming. And Tanya is here from is from Berlin, but grew up in. Anyways, so Murtada, you can say hello. Let's just check your mics. Let's make sure we do that with each person.
Hello.
Yeah. Anyway, thanks for coming, man. And thanks for. Hey, so Tanya, how you doing?
I'm good, thanks.
So listen, so you're in Berlin right now, right?
Well, nearby, yeah.
Yeah, and you grew up in the UK and in Scotland. You spent many years. When did you move to Germany? How old were you?
I moved back in 3rd grade. I did grow up for the first few years in Germany, but 1st and 2nd grade were in England.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, awesome.
Grade, in Scotland.
Yeah. Okay. Hey, this class was your idea, by the way, I think, right? Aren't you the one that asked? Okay. So thanks for being part of it. Hey, and Songmin, how are you?
Hi, I'm doing good, thank you.
And where are you right now?
I'm currently in Trier, Germany for a bit, and then we moved back to Korea, and then we moved over here to Germany.
Mm-hmm. And you lived in Luxembourg for a bit, I think, right?
Yeah, I went to school in Luxembourg.
All right, awesome. And Julia, how are you?
Yes, I'm good, thanks.
And you are in St. Petersburg, Russia.
Yeah, right.
And you're okay, awesome. Thank you for being part of it. Thank you for, were you born in St. Petersburg?
Yes, I've lived here for 20 years.
Yeah, okay, and you were in college there.
Yeah.
And Sodaba, let's see if she's strong enough. Sodaba is in Kabul in Afghanistan. I thought it'd be really nice to have somebody from Afghanistan, but we will. Sodaba, how are you? Let's see if we get her internet's going to be a little bit glitchy, but let us.
Is it good now?
Sodaba, yeah, I can hear you. How are you?
I'm doing good, thank you.
So thank you for being part of class today.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, and you'll have to speak really loudly, okay? When you talk.
Is this fine now?
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah.
Okay.
And you are a college student in Kabul, right?
Yes, I'm studying at American University of Afghanistan. Yeah, it's my 3rd semester.
Yeah, what are you studying?
I'm studying law.
Okay, awesome. Well, Thanks for being here. So let's just start with the question: when did you first learn about the Holocaust in World War II? And maybe we'll start with Julia. How about you? Like, think back to when you first heard about, what happened to Jewish people? Like, how old were you? What did you learn?
I guess it's really hard to answer this question because the whole topic of Holocaust is really intertwined with the topic of the World War II. And I have this one impression that I've known about this for my whole life because, my grandparents remember the war, and so of course they told me of many parts of it, and including Holocaust. So it's hard to say when my first meeting with this topic happened, but I remember when I got some personal experience of reading about this. It was when I was I guess 12 or 13. I read this book by Martin Zusak called The Book Thief, and it was my first, as I said, my first personal experience of going into this topic.
Mm-hmm. And I think that what's interesting about you, because just given what happened, how many Russians died during the Second World War. I mean, people just really don't have an understanding of how many tens of millions of Russians were killed. And so it really has a different place for you. So for you, it's always very much been a part of your experience. Murtada, how about you? When did you first learn about the Holocaust and against Jewish people?
I think I first learned about the Holocaust vaguely in middle school, maybe, along with World War II, but about the details, I think maybe in your class, the details of the Holocaust.
Mm-hmm. Really, it wasn't until you got to college.
Like the details of the Holocaust, yeah. But yeah. I did hear vaguely about the Holocaust. Yeah.
And can you remember back when you first heard, like, what did you hear? Like, what was it? Do you have any memory of that?
Like in your class?
No, back when you were in Saudi Arabia.
For the Holocaust, I honestly don't, like, I always heard the term, but I never like looked into it deeply to understand more of it. But it was just intertwined with the World War II topic when we discussed it in history class.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
Tanya, how about you?
Well, I mean, I guess it's kind of similar to Julia. My grandparents, I grew up with them a lot as well in the first 2 years, and they're incredibly involved in all kinds of things to do with World War II. So, including like concentration camps and keeping monuments protected, things like that. And I think the very earliest memory I have of it, though, is a picture book where I think it's a worker camp, actually not a concentration camp, but it's like kind of the same topic. Mm-hmm. And it's quite brutal. And in the end, they all die. So quite early on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. And do you remember, well, hang on, we're going to come back again. I want to, Songmin, how about you?
I would say around 3rd grade or 4th grade. I think that's when I read Anne Frank's diary at school. And that was my first kind of exposure to the Holocaust and actually learning some of the details. I think, as Julia and Tanya said, I grew up knowing that something had happened, but until 3rd or 4th grade, that hadn't been quite explicitly explained to me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And were you in Korea at that time, or were you?
Yes, I read the book when I was in Korea. Mm-hmm.
So, and you read them in Korean or in English?
In English.
Yeah. So how about what do you remember? Like, what do you remember of? Was when you learned about the Holocaust, was it connected to anti-Semitism, or how was it taught? Like, can you go back to that?
I don't think it was necessarily linked to anti-Semitism. I think it was more linked to, in my personal experience, World War II. And
okay.
Generally, when I was in Korea, my knowledge of what had happened and World War II in general was not very clear. And in Korean elementary schools, you don't really talk about world history. It's mostly Korean history. So I was more exposed to it when I moved over to Germany and during history class here at school. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Hey, so hang on one second. Yeah, okay. Hey, Julia, a question for you. How about your earliest memory that people, certain groups of people didn't like Jewish people? Like, what's your earliest memory of like just pure, not setting aside the Holocaust, just anti-Semitism, that there's something about Jewish people that lots of people don't like?
That's very strange, but I don't have such experience because I don't know any Jewish people, and I don't know any people who told something bad about Jewish. And I don't think anti-Semitism is such an actual topic in Russia, because people here are mostly concerned, let's say, suffer from xenophobia towards some other nations, for example, Asian people. And I haven't heard anything bad about Jewish, and I learned about this topic only from literature.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever studied the policies that the Soviet Union carried out against Jewish people?
Yes. And yeah, that's another problem, because anti-Semitism can be discussed as a part of the Nazis policy, but also as a part of Soviet policy. And I guess maybe that's the wrong thing to say, but the lack of anti-Semitism in Russia is connected to the rejection of everything Soviet, because anti-Semitism was a part of Soviet policy, and now people don't like it just because it is associated with something Soviet.
So the idea is that, in other words, so once the Soviet Union collapsed, which was before you were born. I mean, that's like 10 years before you were born. The anti-Jewish rhetoric, that the anti-Jewish policies that were built into the Soviet government, those you don't remember really hearing or reading or learning about any of that after you were born.
Yeah. No, I don't remember. But I remember, I've also, that's not my personal experience, I've read about it, that there were a lot of people who pretended to be Jewish just in order to emigrate to Israel.
Yeah. Well, listen, here at Penn State, for example, and Murtada would know this because you probably had professors. We have lots of, during the early 1990s, we had lots of professors here join our engineering and math departments from the former Soviet states, and a lot from Russia. So in the early 90s, we started to see all of these stores around town in different places, little markets and stuff that were Russian markets, because all of these Russians were coming in who were like these math geniuses and that sort of thing. And many had been just really pushed out of the Soviet Union, very heavily discriminated against all through the later part of the 20th century. Jews in the Soviet Union were really heavily discriminated against, like, unable to buy property and this sort of thing. Hey, Murtada, how about you growing up? What did people say about Jews in Saudi Arabia? Wait, hang on one second. Sodaba, you can, let me ask you, what's your earliest memory of Jewish people in Afghanistan?
To be honest, I have only studied about Jewish people in my high school and history subject and sometimes geography. And I have not heard something negative about them. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I haven't heard anything negative about the Jewish people yet.
So around you in Afghanistan, in the Muslim community, you don't hear negativity about people who are Jewish?
No, I haven't. And like in the community I have been, like these stuff have never been discussed. And yeah, that's why.
That's a good thing. That's good, actually. You know what I mean? There's no reason to discuss. I mean, because there were many Jews in Afghanistan, right? Do you know that? Are you familiar with the Jewish history of Afghanistan?
No, I'm not.
So Jewish people have been everywhere in the world, right? And so there were many Jewish people in Afghanistan. There are still Jewish people in Iran, Jewish communities. There, really are some communities that actually are thriving and do quite well. Okay, so for you don't have a memory of that. All right.
No, because it has never been discussed.
Yep. And do you remember, when did you read about or learn about World War II and the Holocaust?
Again, it was in my high school. Yeah, it was like 2 years or 3 years ago.
Yeah. What did you learn?
To be honest, I don't exactly remember.
Hmm. Do you remember, for example, that many Jewish people were killed?
Exactly, yeah, I do remember that. I guess it was about Hitler and like the large number of Jewish people that they were killed by him. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Uh-huh. And so, but today, nobody ever talks about Jewish people today in Afghanistan.
No, they don't. So far
Yeah.
as I know, like I haven't heard anything.
Yeah. Okay. Hey, Tanya, how about let's talk about Germany right now. Like, what do you hear, and Songman, what do you hear about people who are Jewish, like the Jewish community? Like, what comes up?
Not that much, really. I mean, there's certainly no hate. Well, okay, sure, there's hate, but it's not huge. You don't really see it publicly because of amount of, obviously history that we have with that.
Mm-hmm. What are you taught about the history? Because, you're in Germany, right? And, Germans committed this, what is in some ways the most vile act of the modern world, right? Like, what are you taught about that?
Well, I mean, I guess it does go into quite a lot of detail. We start with history of Jews, I guess, how they're kind of hunted through the entirety of history, how they're hated by everybody, and how that obviously led to them being a scapegoat.
What were you taught about why they were hated?
Well, because they were kind of the only people who were really well off, I guess. They were easy because people were jealous, is what we're taught, basically.
So Jews were well off, and so they were hated, right? Which is very interesting, right? Like that's such a fine line. Because Jews were not well off, right? You know what I mean? But Songman, how about you? What do you see? Like, what do you see today?
I think over the past year, there has been an increased awareness of anti-Semitism in Germany. For example, when I watched the news after the terrorist attack in 2019 at Halle, where a gunman tried to break into a synagogue, there have been, I think, I've seen on the news that the government has been doing reviews on anti-Semitism, and also been cases where during military, there has been anti-Semitism. For example, soldiers with group chats where anti-Semitic messages and far-right messages were propagated. And so I think overall, generally, most people are not exposed directly to anti-Semitism, but you can hear certain bits in the news and in the media.
So there's a lot from your perspective as this person, in some ways an outsider, some ways an insider, but you it feels to you like there's really a movement and an attempt to really address any anti-Semitism that might rise up.
Yes, and I think Germany is doing a very good job in trying to educate the younger generation of the historical atrocities committed, and especially being Korean and hearing about what other countries have done in terms of historical education. It's very admirable to see. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Tanya, let me go back to you really fast. What would you add to that about Germany? Because you spent a lot of time in the UK and Scotland. Like, what would you add to yours?
I mean, I guess the only thing I could add is obviously the fact that even in schools, if people start spreading anti-Semitic stuff, like pro-Nazi stuff, it's immediately addressed. I remember it's always in 10th grade. Somebody will start a group chat. They will send stickers, maybe just with the Nazi imagery or something, and then it will be immediately reported to the police, and they will come in and it'll be.
Is showing or drawing a swastika illegal in Germany?
Yeah.
Yeah. Same in Russia. Yeah. Same in Russia, by the way. Julia, my wife and I were at your university giving a talk 3 years ago. And one of the slides that we used it was actually, I think might have been that slide that I showed in here, and it had a swastika on it. And as soon as we showed that in the auditorium, everybody got really nervous because it's illegal to show a swastika. And so, we like deleted it. We showed it and then we deleted it from my jump drive, So in Russia, you can't show a swastika. So Tanya, do you remember and then I want to go to Murtada. Do you remember watching, how many videos of the Holocaust have you watched? Like Auschwitz and like concentration camps, I think.
Quite a few. Obviously, the time that I was in school has now been cut short a bit because of the current issues with coronavirus. But while we were still in school, we did watch quite a few live footage videos of concentration camps in action, I guess. Really heavy stuff.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, really heavy stuff. Here, you should know what's really interesting is that for quite a number of years, I used to show a video on Auschwitz to my class. It was called Night and Fog, and it was just this original footage that this person put together, which is just really, just incredibly disturbing. It was shot by British filmmakers, and after the liberation of Auschwitz, but they had footage from early on that they got from the Nazis. And I used to show it every semester, and then I stopped showing it because I don't know, it just felt like everyone had seen it. But then I realized that people in my class, one semester after not showing it for like 8 years, I asked my students, how many of you have ever seen footage like this from concentration camps in World War II? And only like 5% of the students raised their hand, and all of them were Jewish students. That Americans increasingly are not even watching that footage, and so people have no idea what really happened. So what you're saying about watching these images that are really difficult, increasingly we're not showing that here in the United States. And so then we went back to showing that footage because people need to see this. But we can't show it on Twitch and YouTube where we get flagged, and so we haven't shown it for the past year. But hey, Murtada, let me ask you, how do people talk just in Saudi, right? How do people talk about Jewish people? Like, what's the conversation?
Yeah, I think I'll first start with the term anti-Semitism is I only know about it when I moved to the US or started college, and it's still, I don't think it's widely used or known in back home. And I think Jewish people are also intertwined with the topic, the Palestinian Israeli conflict. So I think that's why a lot of people have those that misconception that this conflict relates to the Jewish people, although it's sort of different in my opinion.
Yeah. So what's interesting right now is that in Saudi Arabia, because the Saudi government has signed this agreement with Israel, and they're it's a trade agreement, a cultural exchange agreement, that we're now seeing flights between the two countries, which was, 10 years ago, that was never, ever, dude, 2 years ago, that was never going to happen. And in fact, when I've been to Israel, and when I show my passport at the border in Israel, because I travel around to lots of Arab countries, I always ask them not to stamp my passport, because when I go I don't want to get to certain Arab countries and have them find my passport stamp that I was in Israel, or that's going to be a problem for me. And so I don't have an Israeli stamp on my passport, and lots of people do that. But I do know that now that Saudi Arabia has established this agreement with Israel, that the Saudis are now going through their textbooks and they're starting to scrub them of the Go ahead. Yeah.
I don't think that's, I think it's the UAE and Bahrain that started that agreement, but Saudi Arabia now.
Oh yeah, right. Okay. All right. I got you. All right. So the UAE is going through and yeah, you're right. It's not that, yeah, you're right. The Saudis haven't done that yet, but no, but wait, but I think that, so they don't have the agreement, but I think the Saudis are still changing some stuff in textbooks that would be anti-Semitic. Certainly the Emirates are doing that, but I think your country is also, I'd have to jump on the Google to see, but yeah. So what you're saying is the way Jewish people are seen is through the eyes of the conflict between the Palestinians and the Israelis.
Yeah, I think the word like Jewish or like in the translation in Arabic is always associated with the conflict, and like I think there is a difference between like Jewish and Zionism, which is yeah, I think that's the clear confusion in that most Arabs have.
So what are your thoughts about that?
Oh, like it's just I don't think that most Arabs do have anything against like the Jewish people, but it just stems from that conflict, which is mostly political and not about the Jewish people.
Yeah, so I have a couple of thoughts on that. One is, and I see this here in the United States among people on the left, in particular, who exhibit in my mind anti-Semitism, and oftentimes they cloak or they shroud that anti-Semitism as not being that they don't dislike Jewish people, they dislike Israel and they dislike Israeli policies. And so it's nothing against Jews, I'm just against the Israeli policies, right? And so so I see that a lot here in the United States, and I see it with people, again, in particular on the left. And one of the questions I always have for those people is like, well, okay, so you don't like how the Israelis are treating the Palestinians and, in Gaza and the West Bank and so on, but how about some of the other conflicts around the world where people are being mistreated, like in China and the Uyghurs, right, for example, or wherever we want to go. But it seems to me that what I see a lot with people who speak out against Israeli policies against the Palestinians, and there's plenty to talk about that, but they don't also talk about the policies or things that are happening in other countries around the world. There's just something about Israel that people just keep hammering on. And when I see that myself as someone who is focused on lots of conflicts around the world and inequalities and so on, it makes me really think, hang on, is this like really about Israel, or is this really about some just something about Jewish people, right? Distrust of Jewish people or something. Do you have a thought of that? Do you have any thought on that? Just as a, and the idea being that a lot of times, whenever we just keep talking about one group or one thing in particular, it's like that's fine, but are we also looking at some of the other things that are happening in the world, and out of fairness, right? But what I'm hearing from you is you don't hear a lot of dislike of Jewish people, just Jewish people. So if I came to Saudi Arabia and I said, hey, I'm Jewish, I'm like, people are going to be like, okay, that's cool.
Yeah, I think for the most part, yeah. Yep. But I think it's because of the conflict, a lot of people have that misconception. So still, you would find someone still, yeah.
Yeah. Well, by the way, and hang on. By the way, in fairness, there are all of the Arab states are, how do I say? There's like a Western attack in a certain way, or against all of the Arab states, right? So that conflict in Israel-Palestine is sort of symbolic of other ways in which the West has attempted to really impose its will on the Arab states, on the Gulf states in particular. Yeah, because we want your oil, Yeah. Hey, Julia. So I want to go back to you. How about videos and stuff from the Holocaust? Do they show them in schools there? Like in your high school, did you watch videos?
I think I didn't watch videos from Holocaust in my high school, but yeah, I've seen Night in Folk that I told about, and it's really impressive. In high school, I remember that we watched the reels of other genocides, for example, genocide in Zimbabwe, if I'm not mistaken. But from Holocaust, no, because maybe Night in Folk is quite extreme for high school students.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So it's like so that would be a lot. Hey, how about the rise of, the kind of extreme right-wing groups in Russia right now, right? What do you follow that? Do you pay attention?
Well, first of all, I'm sure it's not about Jewish people. It's not about Judaism. All this nationalist stuff is, it has been forbidden a few years ago. So that picture that you showed us, I guess now you cannot see that on the streets.
Mm-hmm.
Never, because guys who went with these flags, they would be arrested. And yeah, it's just after the collapse of Soviet Union, there was a huge rise of different parties and different political views, far right and far left. And it was, I guess, the right wing was strong maybe until the beginning of the 2010s.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's not anymore.
Yeah, I was reading something recently about a couple of the really large extreme right-wing nationalist groups in Russia that had turned against Putin and turned against your government, right? And so they're going to get squashed immediately, right? I mean, this is not, people identify Putin as being really right-wing, and that's not the way to look at that. Yeah. And so it's what makes, Russia so really fascinating. Hey, we have a couple questions from the live stream, by the way. So do you want to put them out? You can either tell me in my ear, or we can. All right. Really like to hear from the Korean fellow about from so on and the controversy about her posing in photos with a mannequin dressed as so this is a K-pop star. Yeah, the controversy of her. And Tanya, you're a big K-pop fan. You're probably all K-pop fans. So go back to the question. But opposing soldiers has been a really hot topic on Twitter and so on, right? So does anyone want to put something out on that? Is anyone familiar with this controversy? Sungmin or Tanya, are you?
I've heard about it. Yeah, I think in general in Korea, there is not a lot of in-depth education about what happened during World War II in Europe and the Holocaust and the atrocities committed. Yeah. And so a lot of the a lot of people tend to kind of joke over subjects like this, which would not be possible here in Germany. For example, doing the Nazi salute or something like that. And it's interesting because recently I read an article about a survey that was done in Asia about levels of anti-Semitism. And in Korea, especially high compared to other Asian countries. And thinking about Korean people, and because Judaism and the Jewish community is pretty much non-existent in South Korea. However, there has been a lot of interest in Judaism because many Koreans view the Jewish community to be very successful and intelligent, and because South Korean parents have such an interest in education of their children, there has been a growing amount of people that are using, for example, the Talmud.
The Talmud,
and such sort of like education methods that are used in the Jewish community, and that went viral a few years ago, I think, and
and in Korea, as you talk about that, so I did an interview a few weeks ago on one of the Korean television stations about Korean education compared to the U.S. education, right? And it's just there's hard. I don't think there's a country in the United States or in the world that's as hardcore about education as Koreans are in the same kind of way. So I could see that connection. Also, just given the rise of Christianity, although it's not a Pentecostal Christianity in Korea, but it is a really like deeply rooted Christianity that is just really, really extensive. And it's kind of its own unique Korean-based Pentecostalism that I would think there would be some kind of interest in Judaism as well. Yeah. Hey, how about do we have another question from anybody else want to comment? Hang on. I actually want to comment on it. And then if someone else wants to comment on the K-pop piece. I think this is one of those examples of, you've got this K-pop star who is posing with this mannequin dressed in a Nazi clothing. And it's one of these examples of people just being uneducated about things in the world. And as a result of being uneducated about things in the world, they would do something like that and have no idea, what Nazism even represented. Was this people oftentimes, for me, what I find is people don't know the difference between fascism and communism, right? So it's like the same thing. Nazism and communism, aren't they like they're the same thing, right, in people's minds? And so this would be the example there, like people just having no idea what the Nazis were and what they represented and so on. Yeah, so another question from the stream, or go ahead, a couple more. Yeah.
Hold on, can I quickly say something though on that?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Tanya.
Like East Asia and Nazi imagery, I find it I'm very interested in like anime and games from Japan and like those things as well. And I find it quite unsettling sometimes that I see Nazi imagery, but it's clearly meant to be Nazis depicted in their media. So like there'll be games and like, yeah, sure. Maybe they are even connected to World War I or II, but it's clearly meant to be Nazis. And there's just, I don't know, as a German, it's just so unsettling to me to see that kind of thing. And maybe they don't even know it's meant to be Nazis. And they just think that.
And so these are all in like you say in video games, right? So a lot of it is anime and cartoonish, animated characters and so on and so forth, right? Yeah, that's fascinating. Okay, go ahead. Next question from the stream. Yeah, go ahead.
The next question is from El Diablo Blanco. and they ask,
hang on, Blanca, the white devil. Go ahead. Yeah.
Can Sam talk about political Zionism versus theological Zionism and its importance to this discussion?
Yeah. Oh man. All right. I can talk about that. Listen, Zionism, the idea of Zionism. So one of the problems that I run into all the time is that I'm a generalist, right? So the way I teach this class is I say a little, I gotta know a little bit about everything, just enough to put things out there in a thoughtful way. But Zionism, this idea is like a movement that really emerged in the later part of the very end of the 20th century, but took off in the very end of the 19th century, but took off in the early 20th century. That God, there was a mandate between God and the Jewish people, and that this stems back to Abraham, right? Who was like this chosen person by God, and that God would give the land of Palestine, what is considered Palestine, but of Israel, right? So it's the same land, to give that to the Jewish people. And so Zionism is this kind of movement to make true, or to bring into the world, God's covenant. And so that the Jewish people would return to Israel, right? Because this is really important. For the Christian people, this is important because it means that, this is one of the covenants that has to be fulfilled before Jesus can return to the earth, right? And so it's like this really incredibly complicated thing that you've got all these Christians who are just waiting for the end of the world because they somehow think this is going to be a good thing. So they want Jesus to return and God to come down and do whatever God's going to do. And so we need to get the Israelis, all the Jews, back into Israel so that we can fulfill that covenant between God and Abraham. And so that's like this kind of the theological Zionism. But the political Zionism part is that, hey, by the way, the next top hat is going to go up in about 30 seconds. So the political side of Zionism is this idea that this is not about God, right? This covenant between we can believe anything we want to believe about God and Abraham or this person or that person, but this is all just people writing whatever they want to write. But the truth is, if you're going to get Israelis back into or the Jewish people back into Israel, it's going to be a sociological, political process. This is not about God. And so among the Jewish people, the extreme Orthodox people are very often very much against the state of Israel because God didn't recreate the state of Israel as we see it today. Right? Well, that happened by human beings. And so God needs to do that. And so the state of Israel is an illegitimate state. It's an illegitimate nation state, according to many Orthodox and traditional Jewish people who have been waiting for God to do that, but God hasn't done that. So that's like the difference between this is just a politicized move where a group of Jews were able to convince people, hey, we need to recreate or create the state of Israel. And so that happened. So that's the difference. And that matters because how we see Israel, really matters a great deal. But at the same time, for me, I just see the longest hatred, 2,000-year hatred of Jewish people that doesn't seem to be going away. Although it's really goes underground a little bit. So I want to go to like what Murtada said. You can bring people back on the screen for a second. Murtada, so in all my travels in the Arab world, I've experienced very little anti-Semitism, actually, including in Palestine. So, I've been traveled throughout Palestine. I do not find a lot of anti-Semitism among Palestinians. I have my experience, including people who thought I was Jewish. My experience has been that Palestinians are much more open. They're much more likely to believe that peace with Jewish Israelis is possible than Jewish Israelis are to believe peace with Palestinians is possible. That's just me coming at this as this outside observer, living among Jewish people, living among Palestinian people, watching the two and just calculating. I find that a great deal of, I don't find the kind of extreme anti-Semitism among Muslims and among Arab Muslims. Is it not what I would expect, and not nearly what people think is out there. So it kind of goes with what you said, Murtada. I believe if I go to Saudi Arabia, it's not a big deal. Julia, all of you are saying like you're not seeing this kind of anti-Semitism. So Sudaba, just thinking about what you said in Afghanistan, I mean, you're not seeing Jews in Afghanistan, but people aren't talking about the Jewish people. Do people talk about Palestinians?
About the Palestine, no, not really. But then it's interesting for me that I'm 20 years old. I have been growing like all this time in Afghanistan, and I had no idea that Jewish people like still exist in Afghanistan, and they are like in Balkh province in Herat.
Yeah.
And I was like, I never like, no one ever discussed this, and I never knew that these Jewish people like they do live in Afghanistan, and that was kind of interesting for me. I just like got to know about this.
Yeah, that's very cool.
They don't talk about Palestine too. It's just like no discussions, not in classes, not in families.
Well, the truth is that you have plenty of issues in Afghanistan to be dealing with, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Hey, so final comments. Let's just go around. What are a couple of final comments that you all have? We can start with Tanya. What do you think? What would you like people to know about what just what do you think it's important that people understand about this issue?
I don't know, honestly, because I feel like I still don't really know what they know. So it's kind of like, what is important that they know that they don't know yet?
Yeah, I got you. Yeah, that's really, what's like something, what's something that have discovered about this that makes you feel optimistic about your generation?
That people aren't really seeing it themselves, that people are being anti-Semitic. I think that's really good.
That people are really educating themselves about it. People aren't exhibiting anti-Semitic views.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Sodaba, how about you?
So one comment, like as it was a very new topic for me, like talking about like Jewish people and anti-Semitism and all stuff. But then, yeah, I also believe that it's, I guess, kind of decreasing the number of the people that they're anti-Semitism. And yeah, I guess that's so good.
I think what makes me feel optimistic is hearing you say, hey, I'm learning that there are these Jewish people in Afghanistan and I want to learn about them.
Yeah, of course. I mean, that's so interesting. After this class, of course, for sure, I want to learn more about them. I'm like, that's so
cool.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's very cool. Hey, Songmin, how about you?
Yeah, I think as you've said, exposure and experience with different types of people and the Jewish community is how we will move to solve this issue. And I think at the same time, we shouldn't become complacent about learning about the past history. But yes, I think I'm also optimistic about the future. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, thanks. Julia, how about you?
Well, I think that it's important for people to understand that the roots of European culture, the roots of Christian culture, they actually lie in Judaism, because Judaism is almost twice ancient as European culture is. And also another thing that is important is to know that anti-Semitism didn't exist only in Germany. It existed and maybe still exists in all countries in the world. And I think that will help people to pay more attention to this problem. And again, I think that is also very optimistic that the number of anti-Semitic people decreases.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, I like that. Hey, Murtada, how about you?
I think I'm definitely optimistic about the future, and I would love to that more people are learning about, like in the Arab world, the distinction between like Jewish as a religion and the political.
Yeah. Yeah, I find that I have to say that what I was saying about Arabs, what I have to say that I'm always struck by the degree to which people are, for the most part, really kind toward other people. And with anti-Semitism, there's just this kind of underlying thing that so many people have that I don't know what to make. But yeah, I'm with you on that. I agree with you. Yeah. Hey, thanks everybody thanks for just being on. I really appreciate it. Tanya, it's nice having you. Thanks for suggesting this as a topic. And yeah, thanks. It's great. Tanya's mother has been in class, has spoken in class a couple of times about this issue. She is a citizen scholar sociologist. So yeah, very cool. And Sotiba, thank you. And thanks for being part of World in Conversation.
Thank you for teaching me something new.
Yeah, no, thanks for teaching us. All right. And Songman, thanks. Thanks for agreeing and participating. Really appreciate it. Nice meeting you.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, I had a lot of fun.
Yeah, great. And Julia, thank you. Thanks for participating, and thanks for being part of World in Conversation, doing some of the dialogues. It's really cool.
Thank you too.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, Murtada. All right. Murtada, anything you need to say about Pack before we leave? Are we good?
I think we're good. Yeah, for the most part. There are a couple of emails, but yeah, the rest are, I think, doing it just fine.
Dude, you rock. Thanks, man. Thanks for holding that down. I appreciate it. All right, everybody. We will see you on Thursday. I don't know what we're going to talk about, but we'll talk about something. And next Tuesday, we have again, I would like to have a couple volunteers who are East Asian. And do I need to make any announcements? All right, man. See you all. Peace, everybody. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
You had everything through it all.